Hey, before we dive in, make sure you subscribe to my channel for more stories you won't forget. That night, everyone at my brother's engagement dinner seemed to know my supposed failures. I sat quietly, napkin resting on my lap, as my father laughed over the years he considered wasted. My brother's smirk said it all, while my mother nodded as though it were undeniable fact. I stayed silent. I didn't defend myself. And then his fiancée leaned over and whispered, "Wait, The room suddenly went still. Even my mother froze. Before I tell you what happened next, tap like, drop a comment with where you're watching from, and share if your family ever underestimated you, because that pause in the air changed everything in that moment. My name is Lauren Hayes. In my family, a name mattered only if it came attached to titles people could flaunt. Realtor, broker, investor, anything solid, predictable, profitable. My name? It drifted around the table like background noise, only acknowledged when someone needed a contrast. The engagement dinner took place in a private downtown room. Dark wood walls, soft lighting. A place designed to make everyone look accomplished. White tablecloths, heavy silverware. Servers refilling glasses before anyone asked. My parents adored venues like this. They believed the room spoke louder about you than anything you could ever say. I sat 2 chairs away from my brother, close enough to hear his quiet jokes, far enough to be excluded from the spotlight. He radiated confidence, already rehearsing his future role as patriarch. Guests leaned in when he spoke, laughed a little harder, and my parents watched him the same way they'd always looked at him, with relief mixed with pride. Nobody asked how I was. Not really. When someone glanced my way, my mother would answer for me. "Lauren's still figuring things out," she'd say softly, like smoothing a wrinkle only she could see. My father added something about patience, about how not everyone was cut out for pressure. Their smiles felt generous, but I wasn't fooled. I focused on the table, the flicker of the candle, the faint aroma of charred steak and pepper, the distant hum of conversations from the dining room. Those details grounded me. I'd learned long ago that staying still allowed people to speak, as if I wasn't there. My brother's fiancée sat across from me, quiet and watchful. She didn't dominate, she observed. When my parents spoke, she listened. When my brother talked work, she asked questions that slowed him down. Her eyes measured tone more than words. At one point, my father joked about how my path had differed from my brother's. Polite laughter followed. I felt the familiar tightening in my chest, the sensation of being turned into a story someone else controlled. I didn't correct him. I didn't defend myself. Silence had become my shield, not weakness, but exhaustion from explaining a life no one cared to understand. What no one realized was that this dinner wasn't just a dinner. It was a test. How long could I endure a room designed to exclude me? And what would happen if someone finally noticed the cracks? My name always came last in conversations about success. Unannounced, uncelebrated, a mere footnote no one expected to read. That night, it wasn't new, it was just louder. As my brother detailed his future, my parents leaned in, nodding at every word. My father added flourishes, turning small achievements into heroic tales. My mother smiled, presenting what she considered the perfect family to the world. Occasionally, someone glanced at me long enough to remind me I was still part of the picture. Barely. Their words pulled me backward. A few months earlier, I'd scrolled through photos from a networking night at my parents' house. Tailored jackets by the pool. Laughter, drinks. I hadn't been invited. When I asked my mother why, she sounded genuinely surprised I noticed. "It's technical," she said. "We didn't want you to feel uncomfortable." Being left out, apparently, was kindness. Then came the holiday barbecue. The heat, the charcoal smell, bending paper plates. I'd been chatting near the fence when my father's voice rose above the music, bragging again about my brother, his business, his legacy. Then he laughed and mentioned me, not with pride, but amusement. People smiled awkwardly, patted my arm like I'd misplaced something essential, and everyone saw it. Back at the dinner, my brother lifted his glass, noting casually that not everyone takes the traditional route. His eyes flicked toward me, a silent reminder of the line drawn. I felt the familiar pressure, the urge to speak, to correct, to say something sharp. Instead, I breathed slowly and folded my hands tighter. Reacting only handed them control. Silence, at least, belonged to me. The worst part wasn't the jokes. It was the offers. Before the engagement, my brother called me softly, concerned, asking if I needed help picking something suitable to wear. He didn't want me embarrassed. The message was clear. I was the problem that needed handling. At the table, my mother leaned slightly toward my brother's fiancée, speaking about my future as if it were some unresolved inconvenience. She mentioned stability, hinting at someone who might one day take care of me. Her hand rested lightly on my shoulder, claiming space under the guise of affection. That's when something inside me shifted. I didn't look up immediately. I focused on the rhythm of my own heartbeat, steady and unwavering. All those nights I'd worked alone, all the calls I couldn't speak of, all the choices I'd made without anyone's approval. They assumed my quiet meant hesitation. They assumed my patience meant dependence. Across the table, my brother's fiancée stopped smiling. She was truly watching, observing. For the first time that night, I sensed that the story they'd been telling about me was running out of space. I didn't flinch when my mother's hand lingered a moment too long. I didn't look at my brother as he nodded, satisfied that my future had been neatly decided. Outwardly, I remained calm, composed, agreeable. But inside, something finally clicked. The truth was, my life had never been as uncertain as they believed. It just didn't resemble theirs. While my parents hosted dinners and spoke loudly of growth and reputation, my days followed a different rhythm. Early mornings blurred into nights. My apartment was quiet, interrupted only by the soft hum of my laptop fan or the occasional buzz of a call from another time zone. I learned to measure progress in small affirmations, signed documents, cleared payments, brief messages that read, "We're moving forward." No applause, no audience, just momentum. I never shared these victories, not from shame but from necessity. The work demanded silence. One careless word could undo months of careful planning. So, when my family offered advice, money, or assistance, I smiled and declined. Letting them underestimate me felt safer than correcting them. That night at the restaurant, as conversations flowed around me, I realized how deeply they had misread restraint for weakness. They saw my rented apartment as failure. My simple clothes were surrender. They couldn't see the discipline it took to live quietly while building something that couldn't afford distraction. My brother leaned back, satisfied. My father ordered another round. My mother spoke of future holidays, already assigning seats. They were confident, comfortable. And yet, I felt the shift before any words confirmed it. Across the table, my brother's fiancée had stopped engaging with family chatter. Her gaze returned to me repeatedly, curious, attentive. She wasn't listening to the words anymore. She was watching the silences, noticing the moments I chose not to speak, the way I never rushed to defend myself. I had seen that look before, on calls where people realized they'd misjudged someone. For the first time all evening, I let myself breathe a little deeper. Not out of expectation, not out of need for validation, but because I understood some truths beyond their control don't announce themselves. They wait. Dinner continued, yet the balance had already shifted. My parents still talked, performing. My brother remained confident, but beneath the surface, tension grew like a wire pulled taut. I stayed seated, silent, not because I had nowhere to be, but because I knew precisely when it would matter to stand. The server returned with another round of drinks, setting glasses down carefully, unaware of the subtle shift in the room. My father raised his glass first, eager to reclaim authority. To family, he said, smiling, and to new beginnings. Everyone echoed him except me. I lifted my glass a beat later, enough not to draw attention. I had learned to survive moments like this by staying half a step behind. My brother dove into another story. Bigger house, bigger responsibilities, a bigger future. He spoke with the certainty of someone never questioned. My parents filled in his narrative, interrupting, polishing, perfecting. Then my father, suddenly remembering a detail, waved in my direction. Well, she's always been independent. The pause that followed was deliberate. My mother laughed softly. She likes doing things her own way, she said, as if talking about a stubborn habit she hoped would pass. We just want her to be secure. You know how hard the world is. I felt the familiar tightness in my chest, the reflex to shrink. I kept my gaze fixed on the table, tracing the grain of the wood, a faint scratch near my plate, anything solid. Across from me, my brother's fiancée didn't look away. She tilted her head slightly, studying me as though a thought had just clicked into place. Then she asked, calm and direct, "Len, what exactly do you do?" The question landed differently from all the others. It wasn't casual. It wasn't polite filler. It was deliberate. Before I could answer, my brother chuckled. "It's complicated," he said, quickly. "Some tech thing. She's been experimenting." My father nodded, relieved to step in. Lots of people try that kind of work. It's a tough space. I felt heat rise to my neck. Still, I stayed silent. The fiancée didn't smile. "What kind of platform?" she asked, eyes locked on me. The table fell into a quiet that felt strange, almost charged. My parents shifted uneasily. My brother cleared his throat. "She's modest," my mother said, lightly touching my arm again. "She's not fond of discussing it." Then the fiancée leaned forward, slightly lowering her voice, not enough to be secretive, but enough to shift the energy. "Is it logistics related?" she asked. I lifted my gaze for the first time in what felt like minutes. "Yes," I said, one word, steady and calm. Her eyebrows rose just slightly. "Global," she added. I nodded. My brother let out a laugh that was a little too loud, breaking the tension in the wrong way. Typical. She ignored him, her focus sharpening, professional now. "Supply chain optimization," she said. My pulse slowed. "Yes." The silence deepened. She exhaled slowly, her gaze unwavering. Then she murmured, just loud enough for the table to hear. "Wait, she cut herself off mid-sentence. The effect was instantaneous. Conversation froze. Glasses paused midair. Even the server at the next table seemed to hesitate. The room felt suspended, everyone collectively holding their breath. My father frowned. "What is it?" he asked, irritation creeping into his voice. The fiancée straightened, composed. "Lauren Hayes," she said deliberately. "You're the founder, aren't you?" No one spoke. I met her gaze and gave a small nod. My brother's reaction was neither laugh nor gasp, a strange mix of both. He demanded confirmation. She didn't answer. Instead, she reached into her bag, retrieved her phone, and with practiced ease, tapped the screen. She turned it toward the table. The headline occupied the space between us. A trade article, analytical, no photos of me, just numbers, quotes from investors praising a founder who preferred the shadows. She slid the phone toward the center of the table. "This," she said evenly, "is one of the most closely watched platforms in the sector right now. Quiet launch, strong early traction, international reach." My father leaned forward, squinting. My mother's smile had vanished completely. "We've been trying to get a meeting for months," the fiancé continued. "No press, no interviews, just results." My brother shook his head in disbelief. He stopped mid-motion when he realized no one was paying attention. She finally looked at him. "You said you wanted me to meet visionaries," she said. Her voice wasn't sharp, it was controlled, precise. I hadn't expected one to be sitting across from me. The room remained frozen. My mother's hand slid off my shoulder as if it had burned her. Her mouth opened, then closed, trying again, but no words came. My father's face lost color. "Why didn't you tell us?" he asked, the sharpness dulled by confusion. I didn't answer immediately. I lifted my glass, took a measured sip, and set it down carefully. "You never asked," I said. My brother sprang up, chair scraping against the floor. "This is ridiculous," he snapped. "If this were true, we would have known." The fiancé's gaze flicked back to her phone. "The whole point was that you didn't," she said. Something cracked in my brother, not anger, not rage, something deeper. The restaurant noise slowly returned, but our table felt sealed in, as if encased in glass. People were staring, whispering. I felt detached, surprisingly calm. I didn't hide it to prove a point. I didn't need anyone's approval. My father swallowed. My mother stared at the tablecloth, fingers clenched. I smoothed my napkin in a deliberate, almost ceremonial motion, placing it beside my plate. I should go, I said, glancing at the fiancée. She nodded once, respect clear in her expression. It was nice to meet you. I didn't look back at my family. I didn't need to. As I walked out of the private room, the silence trailed behind me, not the familiar silence of being dismissed, but one heavy, uncomfortable, and earned. No one spoke. And for the first time, that silence felt like justice. I didn't rush through the restaurant doors. The night air was cooler than expected, brushing against my skin like a reset. I walked a block before stopping, letting the hum of the city fade behind me. My phone buzzed once in my hand. I ignored it. For years, I had imagined this moment ending with shouting or apologies. Instead, it ended with nothing. And somehow that felt heavier. In the days that followed, the silence persisted. No family group messages, no polite text pretending all was normal. When my mother finally called, her voice trembled. Her questions felt like attempts to regain footing, not genuine curiosity. I answered briefly, politely, without filling in her gaps. My brother never reached out. I later learned the engagement dinner had been retold awkwardly, edited to save pride. I let it be. I didn't need credit. I needed space. What surprised me most was how light I felt once I stopped carrying their expectations. My work continued, calls, decisions, progress, unchanged. What changed was the quiet within me. No more bracing, no more proving myself to people who had already decided who I was. I realized then that resolution isn't always reconciliation. Sometimes it's clarity, knowing where you end and others' opinions begin. That night, I didn't lose my family. I shed the version of myself that kept shrinking to fit their mold. And I didn't miss them. I once thought family acceptance would make me whole. Now I knew that understanding myself mattered more than earning a seat at their table. That night didn't change who I was, it revealed it. If you've ever been underestimated by those who should have seen your best, you're not alone. Share where you're listening from, and tell me what helped you stand your ground. And if stories like this resonate with you, subscribe so you don't miss the next.